Welcome to another episode of Chax Chat. Join Chad Chilius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome, everyone. Today's podcast is sponsored by Venngage. Venngage is a design platform that's not just about creating stunning visuals, but also about inclusivity and accessibility. Venngage doesn't just simplify your design process, but it takes it up a notch with built-in accessibility features. Whether you're looking to run an accessibility check on your designs or export them in the PDF UA format, Venngage has got you covered. So head on over to venngage.com and check them out. My name is Chad Chilius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor and one of the accessibility wizards at Chax Training and Consulting.
And my name is Dax Castro. I am the other accessibility wizard of all the wizards that were at Chax Training Consulting. And Chad and I are both certified as accessible document specialists by the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. And if you'd like your certification, head on over to accessibilityassociation.org/certifications and get more information. How you doing, Chad?
Doing well. How about yourself?
Not too bad. We are, garden is moving and shaking, man. My garden is growing. Although my garlic, I am sure, is nothing compared to your garlic. I have got they are hanging on by a thread. It is so hot here.
Wow.
I tried putting straw over top of the dirt to kind of keep the soil moist, and that's helped. But I think I got it too late because I think I have about 4 elephant garlic. I think I've got 4 garlic going. So we'll see. I'm not super excited, but everything else is doing great. Kale is coming in. Carrots are coming in. Everybody says, oh, it's going to bolt. I've got a shade structure over some of it. So we'll see. It's radishes grow fast. So I've already got radishes coming out the wazoo. So
I know our kale and spinach has bolted, so we're done with those already. But now our okra is growing.
Oh.
And we planted some San Marzano tomatoes this year.
Good.
So I'm really hoping. And then our peppers, we've got jalapenos, cayenne, shishitos.
Yep, I've got some shishitos. I'm hopeful for my peppers. Every year, they all do terrible. And this year, I've done a really good job of pruning them and all that stuff. And so I'm hopeful that it's going to work. But no awesome. Garden talk today in lieu of koi
garden talk.
So, well, thanks everybody for joining us today. So today's podcast is really document testing with a screen reader. We thought we would reveal some of the workflows for how to test a document using, in this case, we're going to use NVDA, but you could use JAWS. And for those of you who are on a Mac right now, just realize that you're going to need a PC to check your document accurately, not because Apple VoiceOver does a bad job. It's just that when it doesn't perform consistently is the same as JAWS or NVDA, there's no real way to fix it. And Apple VoiceOver uses its own proprietary method for reading your document, and it either gets it or it doesn't. And when it doesn't, or when you don't get the user experience you expect, there's really not much you can do, because might mean hurting the rest of the screen reader users out there, which, in fairness, the statistic says 85% of the users out there digesting documents using a screen reader or using a PC. But obviously we know, right, Chad, that mobile, if you're on a mobile device, it's likely you're using an Apple device, because the experience on an Apple device using assistive technology is bar none.
Yeah, I mean, VoiceOver on the iOS devices, I think, is phenomenal, right? It's really good. I mean, it's really the way a screen reader should work. VoiceOver on the desktop, the only way I could describe it is that VoiceOver tries to dive too deep into your document. One of the things I like about JAWS and NVDA is that JAWS and NVDA remains kind of like surface level, right? It's like JAWS and NVDA is just reading the tag structure,
right?
Where VoiceOver dives into these extra containers in your document And it's so frustrating to try and use. I mean, I've been trying to become better at using voiceover, but every time I try to use it, it'll tell me like, "Oh, you're in this window frame." I'm like, What is that? I don't even know
Yeah.
what that is, you know?
Yeah.
So I can tell you guys, as a Mac user, right? I test using JAWS and NVDA. And so the way that I accomplish that is I have Parallels running on my computer, which emulates Windows, so you can run Windows on your Mac. And then I'm also using a little product called Carabiner Elements, which gives me the ability to map keys on my keyboard to other keys, right? So in the case of a screen reader, this is just my configuration, I map my right option key to the insert key, which would normally be on a Windows computer, right? And
Right.
that's what allows me to properly test and evaluate documents using screen readers. So it can be done. You could totally do it. You just have to invest a little bit of time and a little bit of money to get the right tools to make it happen.
Weren't you saying too that you had a Windows keyboard that you use sometimes?
Yeah, I do. You're absolutely right, Dax. Sometimes I do. But I find I really don't need it
Sure.
most of the time. But there are those moments where I'm like, you know what? Just give me a Windows keyboard so that I can do it, the way that it was intended. And yeah, like I went to Staples one day. I think it was after you and I talked. I ran over to Staples, bought a wireless keyboard, and yeah, I just plugged the
The
little
dongle.
dongle into
Yeah.
the thing, and yeah, so that's another way you can you can make it work.
Great. Well, let's start off by talking about
Yeah.
what we just talked about, which is the insert key. There, when you're using a screen reader, you use a modifier key to allow NVDA. We'll just talk about NVDA in this case, but it could be JAWS or NVDA. They both use the same modifier key um, to activate the shortcuts for the screen reader. So insert is that key, but you can also activate the caps lock on your computer as well. And I know for me, I'm my left hand does a lot of my keyboard shortcuts, and so I use the caps lock key for things like caps lock Q, which is quit NVDA, right? Or well, that's really kind of the one I use most. But So that's one key to know, the insert key. The other thing to note is we teach people there are a couple of different ways to silence NVDA, right? There's a permanent way, a temporary way, and I guess those really are the two ways, right, Chad? And how do we do
Yeah.
this?
Yeah. So yeah, like if you so short term, I'm gonna call it short term shut up, right? Because people who try to use a screen reader will often be like, "Oh my God, why does it keep reading everything that I'm doing?" So like short term is like just press any key on your keyboard, right? Like short term.
Well, not any key, because if you press a G key or you press
Okay.
the H key, so
All right.
what we normally teach people is if you just press the Shift key, it isn't mapped to any single shortcut. So Shift will temporarily pause the screen reader until you mouse over something or do something else.
Right. And so when you're testing a document using assistive technology, get your hands off the mouse, right? Like
Right.
that's my number one advice for people, right? Because people who use assistive technology do not use a mouse. So if you're trying to use a mouse it's just going to be chaos, right? It's not going to be a good experience,
Well, there is a way to turn off. Are you
Yeah.
That's where you're going, Chad? Go
No,
ahead, keep
no, no,
going.
no, no.
Yeah.
No. It's exactly what I was thinking too. So short term, like Dax said, press the shift key. You could also press the insert key. A number of keys. But you're right. Some keys will activate a different function. So shift is a good kind of like neutral key that you can use. Longer term, right? So if you do press a key, but then you do move your mouse or do whatever, it's going to start voicing again. So longer term, if you're like, you know what, I need a break, because like Dax and I do this all the time, where we may want to go into Acrobat to modify the tag structure to fix a problem that we found. And if you leave it on, it's continually like talking to you and voicing you. So if you want to silence NVDA longer term, right? You don't want to just pause it temporarily, you can press Insert S on your keyboard. And what that'll do is it's going to cycle between a couple of different modes. So the first time you press it, it's going to say speech mode beeps, right? And what that's basically going to do, if you continue using the screen reader, it's not going to voice to you, it's just going to beep at you. Dax and I aren't really sure what the value of that is.
If any of our
know,
listeners know what speech
yeah,
mode beeps is for, please let us know, because I don't understand what the value is of hearing a bunch of beeps as you move through content, right?
yeah.
But then the next one, right? So it's speech mode
So,
beeps. Go ahead.
and then insert S again will go into silent mode. I think it says speech mode
Beeps, talk, silence.
silent, right? So
So
then it'll go speech mode silent, and then now whatever you do on your keyboard, nothing is going to be voiced whatsoever. And
right.
then one more time you press it, it's going to go back to speech mode talk. So again, in order, you're by default you're in talk, then you'll go to beep, then you'll go to silent, and then one more time you go back to speech mode talk.
And it's actually updated what it says now. So it says speech mode beeps, speech mode on demand, speech mode off, and then speech mode talk. So it'll cycle through those a little bit, but it's basically the same thing. You're going to get a beep, you're going to get nothing, you're going to get back to talk, or you're going to get the toggle. So speech mode off and speech mode on demand, a little esoteric, right? So off and on demand really are kind of the same thing, except for if I press a specific shortcut key, it's going to talk, because I've told it if I go to Shift G, which is, or if I just press G, not Shift G, but G, it's going to go to the next graphic, and then it's going to voice that graphic because I've demanded that it voices it. So it's a little different, right? But going back to all this, the reason why we silence the screen readers a lot of the time is because it's trying to figure out where our mouse is and what our mouse is talking, what our mouse is touching. So the first thing we try to teach people is to turn off mouse tracking. So turning off mouse tracking is Insert M for mouse tracking, and you'll hear mouse tracking off, mouse tracking on as you toggle through those. So turn that off first of all as a thing, right? And then using your keyboard, you can do that. Just know that Chad mentioned something earlier about if you want to go in and edit your document, and NVDA is still running, and you temporarily silence it for a while, just know that NVDA may not voice the changes you've made in your tags tree. I've noticed sometimes it will save the document and reprocess it in a short document. Other times, no matter what I do, the only way to get it to interpret the document with the changes I've made is to close NVDA and reopen it, or close the document and reopen it. Because one thing to know about a screen reader is that when it opens a document, it caches the entire voice library of that document. So if you've got a document with 2 pages, NVDA is going to read relatively quickly. It's going to open the document. You might have a 4-second delay, and then it's going to start reading. But if your document's 200 pages, go get up and get a cup of coffee and hang out for a bit. You'll come back, and then it'll finally start to voice the content starting from the first tag and moving on down.
And to help everybody out with that, one of the things that can be very helpful when you are testing a document with a screen reader is to change your reading mode in Adobe Acrobat, right? So Acrobat has if you go to the accessibility tool, there's going to be an option in there called reading mode. And the default reading mode is to read the entire document. Now, as Dax said, you open up a 250-page PDF file, go get a cup of coffee, go for a walk or whatever, because you're going to be sitting there for a long time. Another reading mode you could choose is only read the current page, right? And I have some experience with this because, I've been on a project where there were some subject matter experts who were blind users. A lot of them prefer one page at a time as a default behavior. And if you do that, so the downside of that is if you say read the next heading, it'll likely say no next heading because it's only looking at the current page.
Right.
And that's what I like about reading the entire document, because if you say go to next heading, it'll go to whatever page the next heading is on. But if you're in read only the current page, you're going to have to use the keyboard shortcut on your computer to go to the next page. Now, the shortcut for that is page up and down, right on your keyboard.
Yep.
Depending on your keyboard, you might have to add the F-in key, the
The F and
function
key.
key,
Yep.
the function key. So you might have to do function page up or page down. That's what I have to do on my laptop.
Sure.
But just be aware of that. So
right. So we've talked about how to silence NVDA, right? But moving through a document, literally, the down arrow is the simplest way to move through a document. However, there are faster, more efficient ways to move through the document. And it's usually the letter of the word of the thing you're trying to search for, right? If I want to move to the next heading, I press the H key for heading. If I want to move to the next graphic, I press the G key to move to the next graphic. T for table, right? The tab key is the next focusable item. So the next hyperlink, the next form field, the next button, whatever those elements are, that's whatever interactive element it is, the cursor is going to move to that spot, right? So those are some of the shortcuts that you can use. Now, Chad, you have a series of shortcuts though for headings that I thought is interesting. Talk about that.
yeah. So like if you just press the H key, it's going to go to the next heading no matter what level that heading is on, right? So if you're on an H1 and you press the H key, it'll go to the next H2 or maybe the next H3, right? It's going to go through every heading in your document. But a lot of times when you're reading a document, you might get into a section where they used headings at a certain level for the items in that section,
Right.
right? And in those cases, you can simply use the numbers 1 through 6 to read a specific heading number in your document. So if I press a 3, it'll read the next H3 only. Or
Right.
if I press a 2, it'll read the next H2 only. And conversely, another helpful tip here, if you press Shift and H or shift any of the number keys, it'll go backwards to the previous heading or previous heading number that you choose.
And it's important to note that shift is actually the modifier key for every keyboard shortcut. It means go backward,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So shift H, shift G, shift T, all of those things are going to get you to and from. Now, so we've talked about some of the basic shortcut keys. How do you triage? How do you walk through a document to make sure it's accessible? Well, the first thing you want to do is make sure when the document opens, the title is being voiced. It'll voice the file name as well, but it should voice the title in addition. Then you're going to, it's going to start reading the content on the page. And as you move through the content, you may see a focus indicator, a red or purple box around the content as it focuses moving down. You could then let it keep reading as it goes, or you could press the down arrow and cycle through the different things. But what are some of the things, the kind of first level things you're checking for, Chad? What do you want to know at the most top level that's happening?
In a document?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, probably one of the first things I do is I read the headings, right? That's one of the first things that I do. And I always get concerned when I go to read the next heading and it says no next level found, right? Because we've talked about this before. One of the really common violations that Dax and I see is a violation of WCAG 1.3.1 info and relationships. And info and relationships simply says that content should be tagged as what it is, right?
Right.
And we see many document stacks that we open up. People will send us a file and say, hey, how does this document look? Right. And I'll open up the tags tree and I see nothing but P tags.
Right.
Right.
Nothing but paragraphs, no
Yep.
structure whatsoever.
And that's a huge violation, right? Like
Right.
if you haven't added heading structure to your document, you're preventing users from navigating the different sections of your document. You're preventing them from being able to easily decipher the various components, of that document. So it's
Right.
really, really important, right? But we see it. You and I see it all the time, Dax, right?
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
and so having those headings, that's one of the first things I check for is, do I have headings, right? So I'll go through, okay, we have headings. Great. That's a good start. Now, what about the other elements in this document, right? So if I see that there's tables in the document, okay, let's hit the T key. Boom, should go to the next table. T again goes to the next table. Great, that looks good. You could try navigating the lists, the L key, that will jump to the next list, right? So, when we say test your document with a screen reader, we're not saying that you need to read all 28 pages of your document with a screen reader. We're saying let's do some intelligent spot checks so that we can determine if it's easy for us to navigate through that document and identify what the elements are inside of that document.
Yeah, and as you go through the document, you're going first level you're looking for headings. You're trying to make sure that those heading levels are there. Then you're going to look for non-paragraph content, whatever that is. It could be a list, it could be a sidebar, it could be infographic, and you want to make sure that that is represented by the screen reader. So you might press the down arrow or the G key or some key to get to that area in the document. The other thing you should be noticing is the page number as you navigate the document. Many times I've gotten a document where I'm navigating through the document and I'm not paying attention, and there's a whole section that didn't get tagged at all because it's a combination of 3 different documents. Maybe it's the first 20 pages are one document and the second 30 are the next document, and and they put it all together, but somebody didn't tag a whole section in between. The screen reader, the checkers are not going to tell you, hey, you missed 12 pages. They're going to say the things that needed to be tagged that have tags, and they're correct. So I've seen it many times where whole sections of the document are not tagged. I hit the next heading level and I go from page 2 to page 30. And I'm like, whoa, there can't be 30, 28 pages with no heading levels. And usually it's because they're just not tagged correctly. Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
I mean, and another way that happens, I had it happen this week, Dax, where the entire first page of a document had no tags,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
but all the other pages had tags.
Yeah.
And I'm really good at detective work.
Sure.
And what was weird is in the tag structure, there were articles in the tag structure.
Mm-hmm.
And what it told me is the user forgot to add page 1 to the articles panel.
Right.
Now that's an InDesign specific situation, but regardless of the tool you're using, you want to make sure that all of your content is getting appropriate tags, in the resulting document.
Well, and it's likely that sometimes graphic design departments will design the cover only of a document, and a production designer will design the rest of the content. And if they just drop in that PDF cover page and it's just a photograph, or it's an Illustrator document where everything's all line art, then it's not going to have tags at all either. So,
Exactly.
be looking for those types of things. So, as you're looking for headings and list structure, you're looking for those info and relationships. When you get to a table, you want to hear the appropriate number of columns and rows. It's going to tell you when you get to that table, the first thing it's going to do is read a table summary if the table summary is there. It's going to say table with 12 columns and 12 rows. And then if there's a table summary, it will go right into the table summary. And then it will start navigating left to right, top to bottom, from cell to cell. You can override that by holding down the Control and Alt key and pressing any of the arrow keys on your keyboard. You have to use 2 hands to do it, right? So holding down Control and Alt with your left hand and pressing the arrow keys with your right hand allows you to move up or down, left or right within the table. And what you're trying to test for is, do the column headers and the row headers, if there are any, voice correctly to identify the data inside those tables? And oftentimes the answer is no. Or if there's blank cells, oftentimes the column header might be the wrong column header for that column. And that's actually a bug within NVDA and JAWS, depending upon what version you have, where it misaligns the header to the
Yeah.
column header to the table when it's a blank cell. So that's a
Right.
good cannon fodder for those out there who say, hey, you shouldn't have any blank cells in your table. Technically, it should be okay to have a blank cell in your table, but because of the shortcoming of the software, it's better to have a space or a zero or a something. Try not to use things that voice. I mean, an M dash or an N dash um, makes it harder, but at minimum, a space would be good, so that at least there's something in there to align the columns. So,
I'll tell you another thing that I love to look for, Dax, is when I'm testing a screen reader, or sorry, testing with a screen reader, I like to read a couple paragraphs in a row, right?
sure.
Especially on a page that has a lot of body copy. Because if I read a paragraph and then I read the next paragraph and it says blank,
Oh,
and then
yeah.
I read the next paragraph, body copy, I read the next paragraph and it says blank. That tells me that in the source document, they used an empty return between every paragraph to create that vertical space.
Right. Rather
And
than a then space before or space after, which is in every
exactly,
program. You should
it
be using
is.
space before and space after. I think it goes back to our old typewriter days where you just would hit the enter key and just pull it down another line, right? We get used to that, but it adds
Yeah,
blank for the screen reader user.
it does. And this is where we can have that discussion like, okay, is this a barrier, right? Like, is this a barrier for the user? And I think we could probably go either way on this one. I mean, I think fundamentally it's not a significant barrier. I would definitely say it produces a very poor user experience for the user
Well, if you're on a
because
timed test or you're trying to do something that you have to get through quickly because of a time constraint, having to down arrow through all those blanks is a pain in the butt, right? So I agree, not a significant barrier. I don't know that I'm kicking it back if I've got a 500-page document that has nothing but hard returns in it all over. However, I've seen on the cover where there's 19 hard returns in a row. That definitely can be, and we can fix all this stuff in the PDF. You can go in and artifact those. In fact, Common Look has a tool to mark empty content objects as an artifact. So, I mean, definitely it's fixable, but definitely not a good best practice, right?
right, right, for sure.
All right. So you navigate your table, everything sounds right or not. And then the next thing you want to do is listen to your graphics. You want to go to hit your G key and make sure that you're getting reasonable, sufficient alt text. It should not be a regurgitation of the figure label that they just heard. Figure 2.5 income graph should not also be the alt text for that graph. There should be some meaningful data that tells the user what that graph is all about.
Agreed. Agreed. And a graph in a PDF is tagged as a figure, right? And figure
Right.
is a very broad term for, chart, graph, infographic, photo, illustration, right? They're all just kind of lumped into figure, right? And when you're testing your document, that's another great thing to test. So, press the G key, right? And I know that's confusing, right? Because it's tagged as a figure, screen readers identify it as a graphic. Um, but when you read that graphic, you should hear a description of that graphic, right? And if you don't, that's a huge I don't have my flag on me. Huge red flag, right? Should be like boom. You know what I mean? And so that's what you're talking about, right, Dax? Like in the case of like a graph or something like that, it needs to be described, and that's probably I would say it's true for all types of graphics, but especially for like a chart, a graph, anything like that, because the benefit for a sighted user is that a chart or graph summarizes a concept in a visual way. Like you can look
Right.
at a chart or a graph, and in 5 seconds, you could process a crazy amount of information, right? Unfortunately, it's truly not as good of a user experience for somebody using assistive technology because they have to rely on somebody describing it to them, and how well that's done can certainly vary. Right, Dax?
Well, I mean, you're going to get people who are going to dump every data point into the alt text and say, this is what the alt text should be because I can see every data point as a sighted user. I should be able to get that same information as a non-sighted user, as a user of assistive technology. The answer is no. That is not always the case. Sometimes it is, and when it's reasonable, it is. But just as you described, Chad, the idea of a graphic is it gives you a summary of what's going on. So if I've got 3 bars and it's apples, bananas, and oranges had 3 times the volume of sales in January, I want to know that as the summary. Don't give me the data points regurgitated in the alt text. Give me the summary. And then if there's more data that I need to know, if I do need to know the granular, then refer me to an accessible table where I can get that information. But often we don't get that ability to then create a table because the cake's already baked, document's already made. Providing an alternate format at that point really isn't feasible. So people just dump everything into the alt text. And I will tell you, it is so hard to listen to all of that because alt text cannot be paused. Although JAWS does read to a certain point and then stop, and then you can keep going. It kind of gives you a little bit. But if you miss something, you can't go back. And so you got to lose focus and go back into it again and hear it all over again and hope you catch it all. So be careful about just thinking that just because there's data in your graphic that you're just supposed to dump all your alt text into that graphic.
I could tell you, I've talked to a lot of blind users and I've talked about their experience, right? And they will tell you they do not want to listen to a novel of alt text describing a figure,
Right.
right? They truly want the short version, right? Like they're like, summarize this, tell me what it is, and then let's move on, right? They do not want to listen to data, 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 data.
Well, but
It's
it's not
not a
even
great
just that.
experience.
It's not even just that. I've seen so many descriptions and I know what they did. They threw it to ChatGPT because
Mm,
the bar chart says a bar chart showing blue bars and orange bars, where the blue bars mean this and the orange bars mean that, with data values grouped in sections of 3. And it starts going through all this visual attributes of the bar chart when it's the reality is it's
not
about the
helpful.
data and not helpful. I don't care if
Yeah.
it's blue, I don't care if it's orange. I want to know that this is a bar chart showing the comparative sales of oranges versus blueberries, and then summarize a data point, right? And there's a lot more to it. We have a 3-hour class called The Secrets of Writing Effective Alt Text. So while we're kind of riffing here a bit on alt text as a whole, just know there's a lot more to it, but the goal is brevity. I used to say 2 to 3 sentences, 250 characters, no more, no less. Well, no more than that, but I really have changed that approach. It is write it in the shortest way possible while providing meaningful information. And if that's 3
Yeah.
sentences, it's 3. If
Yeah.
it's 4, it's 4. But it shouldn't be 12 when you can do it in 3.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I always tell people be as concise as you can while still accurately describing what the element is. And, that'll generally give you an idea of like where you should be, right?
Right.
Um,
All right. Well, I want to talk about 2 things that you might not, well, maybe 3 things that you might not be aware of when you're checking your document to look for. First of all, it's ligatures. When a word groups letters together, like the T and the H or the F and the F, and they become a single glyph where the F has a single crossbar that goes across it, it's a stylistic thing. Sometimes those fonts are just fine. Other times they're not encoded correctly. And so the word office becomes read as office, and benefit becomes the word beneft. And so if you listen to a few paragraphs using assistive technology, you'll hear it's going to voice correctly or it won't. But be listening for that type of thing. So ligatures is the first one. Second of all, the moment I see drop caps in my document, I'm immediately going to go test paragraphs with those, because invariably no program on the planet properly exports drop caps to assistive technology as the word. It's usually D as its own letter and then ROP as the second part of drop, right? And if you've got a shading or a border on it, sometimes it's DD ROP because the shading gets its own version of the letter D. So just know drop caps are always going to be an issue, and will need to be fixed. And then the next one you want to make sure of is acronyms. Make sure your acronyms are voiced the way you want. Sometimes FACE should be pronounced as face, or NBME should be pronounced as NBME and not MB, right? So definitely making sure that your acronyms are voiced correctly the way you want them to be voiced. Sometimes you'll have a brand name that has like an acronym within it. I've seen some that have N dashes in the middle of their name, and they're like, well, I don't want it to say N. The word was NFIT or INFIT, INM-FIT. And so the screen reader said in M-FIT. And they're like, well, I don't want it to say M dash in the middle of my company name. Yeah, well, you're going to have to change that using actual text within your document. Um, but if Adobe would let us use character style, alt text on character styles, we could fix that. But I digress.
Agreed.
I digress.
Yeah.
So acronyms.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about that, like there's a difference between an acronym and an initialism, because acronyms make a new word.
Right.
And often you want them to be read that way, but initialisms don't make a new word. So the only tool, Dax, that I know of where you can automatically fix that is Common Look.
Right. Common
That's
Look
the
has
only
a
tool
place.
where you can say find
every instance of
Thank you.
MBRE and
Thank you.
and
Yeah,
they should
yeah.
say
Or
MBRE.
I was gonna say like USDA or something like that,
Right.
because there was a time when the screen readers were reading USDA as USDA.
Yeah, it
And of
doesn't do that
course,
anymore.
no,
But yeah.
but it doesn't do that anymore. But there was a time. But if you want to fix it and make sure that it's always read correctly, it can be a heck of a lot of work. But
Right.
Common Look allows you to say find the acronym, and when you find it, apply the actual text to that acronym, and in like seconds, you're done. For the entire document.
If you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to put Chad on the spot.
Uh-oh.
Chad and I were, this has been probably a couple of years ago. We were noodling on a way how to fix this. How, if you're in control of the source document, how can I encode this so that it always reads just those letters? And we realized that in InDesign, they have such a thing as a half space and a micro space. And so Chad created a grep that goes in and finds acronyms, sequential capital letters of a certain length, and puts micro spaces in between those letters. Now, it does space out the letter a tiny bit, but you could probably format that and do kerning and get it to come back. But it's such a small little addition of a space, you don't really notice it. But the screen readers notice it, because then they will always voice it as those letters. So if you're listening to this podcast right now, reach out to Chad on LinkedIn, send him a message and tell him, I want the grep statement for replacing those capital letters, those acronyms with the microspace, and Chad will send you that grep.
Happy to send it. I love helping people with problems, right? I mean, that's really that's really what we do, Dax, right? And in a case like that, like if you've got a document with a lot of acronyms or initialisms and you want them voiced as the individual letters, it's a great solution. I don't have a solution if you're in Microsoft Word. Word doesn't quite have the typographic capabilities that InDesign has. But if you're an InDesign user and you want that fix, just reach out to me and I'd be happy to send that to you.
Yep, absolutely. Awesome. Well, this has been great. So we've talked about headings, paragraphs, lists, those uncommon elements, looking at your page numbers, making sure you're not skipping sections, alt text for your graphics, tables. We didn't really talk about forms, but forms, when you're listening to a form, when you hit tab, it should go into that form and you should hear the tooltip that describes enter first name. Many times we hear first name and that's all we hear. The reason this is a barrier is because the text label for that text is likely to be read as well. So if the document says first name and then the form field only says first name, the screen reader user hears first name, edit. And they're like, why am I hearing it twice? So if you add the word enter, it's going to say first name, enter first name, edit. And you're like, okay, I get it. It's instructions. So make sure that you do that. Don't artifact the content on the page, because you want to give people the ability to read the other content, especially if there's other things on the page that are meaningful. You want them to be able to get instructions or qualifier text or other things in addition, in combination with the form field. So just know that that's a thing. So you want to make sure you can tab through all the form fields in a sequential manner so that it's logical in the way it moves down the content. And that's kind of really the nuance of testing for forms. Just know, as a sidebar, if your document needs to be signed using a secure signature, once you sign it, you have locked all accessibility. So make sure that you've done all your accessibility due diligence before you get it signed.
And this kind of goes back to designing with accessibility in mind, because in print, we always love to put the signature first and then the date,
Right.
right? And if you decide to sign it before you enter the date, it's actually just happened to me today, right? Because I had to fill out a W-9, for somebody, you know who it was, Dax, but I had to fill out another W-9, and it was the signature field and then the date. And I was about to commit, and I'm like, oh, shoot, I forgot to put in the date. So some ways that you can kind of get around that is, as the author, you control the tab order of the form fields.
Right.
So what you could do is have it jump to the date first and then the signature field.
Great comment. Yeah, great tool.
But if we're being honest, why do we put the signature first and then the date? Shouldn't we swap them, right? You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is, but it could just get us into trouble is I guess what I'm saying. So just know that as the author, you can control that tab order. So you might want to have them jump to the date first and then to the signature field and say, okay, sign this document and proceed from there.
Well, I want to close with one thing here, guys, is that we've said this before. A good user experience is really what we're striving for. The checkers help us get there. Passing a checker is great. But unless you're testing your document with a screen reader, you really aren't fully sure that it is a good user experience, because no one's ever going to take you to court because you didn't pass WCAG 2.5.4. They're going to take you to court because the tab order was all over the place and they couldn't figure out how to fill out all the information, and they missed the deadline or didn't fill out something correct that caused them damages. So just know that. Also, we have a class, document testing with a screen reader, 3 hours of some of the stuff you're hearing on this podcast. In that class, we have a 2-page checklist, document testing with a screen reader. We can't give it out for free, but if you go onto our website and sign up for that class, we give it away as part of the people who attend the class. So head on over to accessibilityunraveled.com and look for that class. We are always running it. It is one of those ones we put in our loop of classes because it's so well attended.
And we'd love to see you there, right? It's always fun, Dax, when we get, people from, the podcast or the Facebook group who come on and we get to talk about that. And it's just really fun having those people attend.
Just remember, though, if you're going to go to that class, make sure you've got the screen reader installed on your computer before you attend the class. You have to have NVDA installed on your computer. So if you need to do things with your IT department or your own self, or Carabiner Elements or whatever it is, get the software. Don't show up to class thinking that you're not going to be able, that you don't need it, because you do. You're going to have a hands-on user experience. So make sure you've got that squared away.
Yeah, don't sign up the day before if you haven't installed it on your machine yet. And especially if you're a Mac user, it's going to be a little bit more involved to get everything together. But well, anyway, thank you everybody for tuning in today. We hope you found some interesting and useful nuggets from our discussion today. Once again, we want to thank Venngage for being our sponsor. As a reminder, Venngage is not just a design platform, but it's about creating stunning visuals and inclusivity and accessibility. So head on over to venngage.com and check them out. My name is Chad Chilius.
And my name is Dax Castro, where every other week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.